Okay, today we're going to look at eddy currents. That's our topic for today. It's going to be a shorter video because it's just going to be nice and quick. So the 3 dot points we've got is need to explain the production of eddy currents in terms of Lenz's law. So we're linking what we've done previously in Lenz's law to eddy currents. Second dot point says you need to gather, analyse and present information to explain how induction is used in cooktops in electric ranges. So basically that dot points means we need to be able to explain an application of eddy currents which is in induction cooktops, which a lot of you probably have at home. So you've probably seen them before. The third dot point is gather secondary information to identify how eddy currents have been utilised in electromagnetic braking. So that's our second application of eddy currents that we need to have a look at. Okay, so what we already know is first dot point there is about Faraday. We know that a conductor within a changing magnetic field will induce a current through that conductor. So we did that as a prac as well, where we had a magnet moving inside a coil. So we're moving a changing magnetic field and we induced current in the coil. We also know that the direction of the induced current acts in a direction to oppose the original change. That's Lenz's law. Okay, so we know that 1 will induce a current, 2, we also know what direction that current will go in. Okay, so eddy currents. Just adjust the page, there you go. Okay, if you have a solid conductor, okay, so this occurs in a situation where we don't have a wire, we have a solid conductor. Okay, so here is a solid piece of metal that we're using rather than a wire. So if you have a solid conductor and a changing magnetic field, we know we're going to induce an EMF, but because it's a solid conductor rather than a wire, the induced EMF travels in circular loops, and they're known as eddy currents. Okay, so as per Lenz's law, the eddy currents will be induced in a direction to oppose the original motion. So 1, we know that if we move a solid piece of metal through a magnetic field, we're going to induce current in a circular motion inside that solid piece of metal, and we're also able to predict which direction it's going to go in. Okay, so the two, before we go, I might just go back to the previous slide. I might just show you how we know which direction it's going to be induced in. Okay, so if we have a solid conductor, okay, so that's a metal of some sort, and it's not a wire, it's a solid piece. Okay, if we have a magnetic field going into the page at that point, and if we move our metal across the page, okay, we'll have a changing magnetic field and a solid conductor, that's velocity, and a solid conductor. So we know we're going to induce some eddy currents in that solid conductor. Okay, so let's just look at this section of it. Okay, so this section. If we're moving the conductor across, Lenz's law tells us we're going to create a force that opposes the motion. So this is, let's call that the induced force. The induced force wants to oppose the motion. Okay, so if you use your right hand rule, if you got your, just move this up, if you got your fingers going into the page and you want your force going across the page, okay, we're going to induce the current up the page. Okay, that's the direction of my thumb. So if we're going to induce a current up the page at that point, so the current up the page will create this induced force to oppose the original motion. Okay, so we induce it up the page. Over here in this section, nothing's going to be happening. There's no magnetic field, there's no changing magnetic field. We're not going to induce anything. So the circular motion will come up, down, and through this section. Okay, so that will be your eddy current. It's a bit hard to see there. That's your eddy current, this circular motion of induced current. Okay, and that will happen all throughout this metal. You'll find there's small circular currents which are induced in this particular direction that will oppose that motion. Okay, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. So how we use that. First application is in electromagnetic braking. So if we have a metallic disc, and a magnetic field. Okay, the magnetic field is just on this small section. It's not on the whole thing, just on this small section. As the metallic disc rotates, we've got a moving conductor in a magnetic field. Okay, so we know we're going to induce some currents, and we can predict which direction those currents are going to go. Okay, so with what we just did, we know that currents on this side are going to go up and then around. The currents on the opposite side are going to go in the opposite direction. Okay, but both of these currents are slowing down the motion. They're both acting to apply a force in the opposite direction. Okay, so both of these eddy currents that are produced act to oppose the motion, and so will slow down the disc and eventually bring it to a stop. Okay, it's a short little video here which shows you how that actually works. And let's skip through to the interesting parts. Okay, so we've got a disc and that's spinning. Bring a magnet near it in a small section, and the disc will slow down and actually come to a stop. Okay, so it's a much better, much more efficient way of applying brakes. Rather than relying on friction, you rely on eddy currents to slow it down. Okay, and this one, because it's got that disc has holes in it, the eddy currents don't build up, and so the magnet doesn't really do anything. Okay, that'll slow down just purely due to friction with the axle. Okay, but because of these lines in it, you won't have eddy currents, and so that electromagnetic braking won't work in that example. Okay, let's see if we've got. I'll just show you again. Okay, this is a bit easier to see. So you've got the rotation, bring a magnet near it. That magnet will induce eddy currents, and you can see it stops it pretty quickly. Okay, so that's our first application, is electromagnetic braking. Our second application is in induction cooktops. Okay, some of you might have it at home. For those people who haven't seen it, an induction cooktop looks like a normal hot plate, but it doesn't actually get hot. It can be cooking away. You can take that fry pan off and touch the cooktop and it won't actually feel hot. Okay, so it's a much safer and it's also a much more efficient way of heating food. So the way that it works is down here you have a coil which is acting as an electromagnet. Okay, it's supplied with high frequency AC. So because it's flipping backwards and forwards, it's going to produce a magnetic field that's constantly changing. Okay, so if you have your cooktop, your induction cooktop on top, okay, the base of the cooktop, because there's a changing magnetic field, will induce eddy currents in it. Okay, so if we're producing eddy currents in that base of that cooktop, or base of that frying pan, okay, because the metallic fry pan is a resistor, if we've got these eddy currents running through it, it's going to heat up. Okay, so only the fry pan heats up and it cooks your food, but the actual hot plate doesn't heat up. Okay, only the fry pan heats up. So it's a much more efficient way of cooking, and that's why a lot of people have changed over to induction cooktops. The problem with them is you need a specific fry pan that's designed for this purpose. Your standard fry pans won't work. So that's induction cooktops. So that's our two applications of eddy currents. So I think that's pretty much all you need to know. So go back to the dot points. So explain how we produce eddy currents. So it's just Lenz's law in action with a solid conductor rather than a wire. Need to explain how induction cooktops work and electromagnetic braking works. Okay, hope you enjoy.